Let's face it, the workplace has changed significantly in the last few years, and I'm not convinced that it's for the better. And as a result of this, there's some unhealthy trends that are emerging. So in this video, I'm going to break down some subtle signs that you're working for a toxic employer in the post-pandemic world. Hey everybody, it's Brian from A Life After Layoff, and today I want to talk to you about workplace health. And it seems like the workplace is getting sicker and sicker. And if you followed some of my recent videos on this subject, you'll know that the workplace does need some healing. As we look over the last few years in the workplace, we can see some pretty toxic traits that are emerging and seeming to become commonplace. So in this video, I want to call out some of them so that you know what to look for if you're working for an employer who may be demonstrating some of these, or if you're interviewing for a company, and these are things that you might want to try to pay attention to. But before we get too far into it, if you're interested in learning how to take control back from these toxic employers and reclaim your power, make sure you sign up for my free weekly newsletter. And in it, I share weekly actionable tips on how to reclaim your power and start to act like the CEO of your career. Keep in mind, it's absolutely free, so I hope to see you there. So one of the biggest indicators to me that your workplace is toxic in a post-pandemic world is dishonesty. Unfortunately, this has become so commonplace that it's almost difficult to find an employer who hasn't acted with a degree of integrity over the last few years. And in particular, companies who have announced layoffs. And we've all heard of stories about people who've been laid off while they're delivering babies, while they're out on sick leave, while they're at funerals, holding caskets, getting the call. And of course, we've heard the stories about people who have found out through text message, through email, through their systems being shut down, or worse, commuting all the way to your office, going and swiping your badge, and then realizing that it doesn't work anymore because you've been disconnected from the company's servers. But the dishonesty starts even before the layoffs have happened, because I've been in town hall meetings where the leadership team specifically says that they're not looking at layoffs as an option. And sure enough, every single time when they say that, layoffs are happening. So if you work for a company and you're a survivor of a layoff, I would be looking long and hard at how the leadership team has handled it, because if they lied to you during those periods of time, or they handled things in a very dishonest kind of a way, what makes you think they're going to be any different with you in the future? Because honesty and integrity is not a competency that you can just suddenly learn one day. You either have it or you don't. And if I'm working for a company that is not demonstrating honesty and integrity, I'm absolutely updating my resume and checking out. And generally what happens after these mass layoffs is you have a bunch of overworked people who are nearing the point of burnout, because the work doesn't go away, but the people do. And guess who gets to pick up the pieces? That's right, the survivor of the layoff. And your employer might even say, well, you should be happy that you have a job. Let's get back to business as usual. And they pretend like the big layoff didn't happen and that the work should just carry on as normal. But we all know you're expected to work those extra hours to make sure that the work gets done, because they just did a layoff and you don't want to be on the layoff list next. So it's kind of an unspoken threat that if you don't pull the company line, that your name might be on the list next. And of course, this extra workload results in a lot of burnout, a lot of people just feeling like they can't take it anymore. And there's honestly not a light at the end of the tunnel. And oftentimes these companies will also bootstrap the amount of support that they give you to get the job done. So good luck getting a new computer or a new piece of software when your company's just announced the layoff, but the work doesn't go away. In addition to that, we're also seeing some companies really forcing the issue of returning back to the office. And this one is particularly interesting because you have this period of time, in fact, a long period of time, 2 to 3 years, of people working successfully in a remote setting. And it was originally at the request of the company to begin with. We all have to do our part. We all have to work remote. And guess what? In a lot of corporate jobs, people learned that they could adapt relatively quickly to remote work. And I still scratch my head about how you can convince people that they're no longer effective working remotely when that's been the reality for the last 2 to 3 years. These companies are using the excuse of being in person increases collaboration, it increases the idea generation, and it helps with your career progression. On some level, is that true? Yeah, probably. But I would estimate that a vast majority of people would opt for remote work over the company culture. And not to mention, it's very disruptive to a person who has adjusted their lifestyle 2 to 3 years earlier to the remote first workplace. So you've got daycare situations, you've got people who have adjusted commutes, and in some cases, people who have moved further away from the office to try to get more reasonable housing, etc. And suddenly this forcing of people back into the office is really disrupting that. And not to mention, good luck trying to find a remote job in today's market. They're much more rare than they used to be. So obviously this is going to impact the work-life balance of the average office worker. And it's kind of an accumulation of all these things. You've got longer commutes, you've got longer work days, you've got less people doing the job, and you've got people who are getting burned out. At the end of the day, you want to keep your name off the layoff list, so you make sure that you do the extra, you're going above and beyond. And this whole idea of quiet quitting seems like such a foreign thing in today's market. Even if you're somebody that's not in a job that you can work remotely, a lot of these other things are still impacting you. You're probably overworked as well. But should you try to skirt your corporate duties, don't worry, because a lot of companies are now starting to actively track and monitor their employees. Unfortunately, this is a trend that's increasing in popularity, where certain companies are logging keystrokes. They're looking at how often you step away from your computer or not productive. And companies like Citigroup are even watching how many times you swipe your ID badge to get in and out of the building. And your bonus and your promotions are tied to it. So if you like the idea of Big Brother watching your every step, this is the workplace for you. And of course, these same organizations seem to be overly metrics obsessed. Every aspect of your job needs to be reported back to in this form of some sort of a scorecard or a KPI. Sure, is it nice to be able to see how productive you are? And if one day you didn't hit your target, then you're going to be on some list. And I think that the average employee would care more about the why behind the number versus the number itself. So if your company is overly metrics driven, it might be a subtle sign that you're working in a toxic workplace. Usually if you work in these types of organizations who are demonstrating all these previous signs, the energy level is oftentimes very low. People are walking with their head down. They don't speak much. They don't socialize a whole lot. They don't really seem like they want to be there. And could you blame them when half of their department was just gutted in an all hands on deck meeting where they were announced that they were being laid off? So if you look around your organization or your department and the energy level seems palpably low, people don't seem to be having fun at work, then it's a pretty sure sign that you're in a toxic work environment. But be sure you don't complain about it, because if you mention anything to the senior leadership team, there is a palpable fear of retribution, because if people are genuinely afraid of speaking their mind in your organization because of fear of what the senior leadership team is going to do behind closed doors, then that's absolutely a toxic work environment. And I actually worked for an organization where the CEO, the top level person of the organization, was as toxic as they come. And everybody walked on eggshells around him. People kind of hid when he came walking by. They certainly didn't share what was on their mind in these meetings because he wasn't so open-minded to it. And of course, that's absolutely a toxic work environment. There's no way to shake that any other way. So these are some subtle signs that you might be working for a toxic employer in this new post-pandemic workplace. Now, of course, this is not an all-encompassing list. There's lots of other signs that you should be paying attention to. But I'm just curious, in the post-pandemic world, what are some new signs that you're seeing that are emerging that are what you would consider to be toxic traits of an employer? But if you're feeling hopeless and you're ready to make a change and get out of the toxic workplace, it's time to reclaim the power, and you can do that through a variety of ways. And I actually do offer some training to help you do that. The first one is called Resume Rocketfuel, and it's designed to teach you how to write a professional quality resume as quickly and easily as possible so that you can start getting that first round interview. And once you have that first round interview, it's up to you to market yourself effectively throughout the entirety of the process. And that's where the ultimate Job Seeker Bootcamp comes in. It's going to take you from A to Z through an entire job search, all through the interview process, ultimately landing at that offer. I teach you how to not leave a single dime on the table. If you're ready to make a change in your toxic work situation, that's the course for you. But an even better way to make that change is to learn how to get the recruiter to start coming and finding you, or even skipping the recruiter altogether. And that's where the course Unlocking LinkedIn comes in. It teaches you how to set up a profile in a way that's going to give you the maximum exposure to get those recruiters to start noticing you, and how to leverage your networks so that you can skip the recruiter and move directly into the interview process. It can be an absolute game changer if you're not yet leveraging networking in your job search. Hey, hopefully this video was enlightening for you to be able to start to recognize some subtle signs in the workplace that it might be a little bit toxic. Appreciate you watching. We'll see you on the next one.